Hello, my name is Louis Burrows. I'm a technical expert with Michelin Tires, and today I'm going to talk to you about blockchain, what it is, how it affects your life, both personally and professionally. So, I hope you enjoy the video.
Thanks everyone. Hopefully I can get this working. As a technical expert, I hate to ruin my credentials by not being able to work it. Alright, there we go. So like John said, my name is Louis Burrows. I'm a technical expert with Michelin, and as a technical expert just basically means that they didn't know where to put me. They didn't know what title to give me, so they gave me the title of technical expert. I'm a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy a long time ago. And actually, after I graduated from the academy and I went into the military, I actually got my start in warehouse management. So that was the first job I had, and I joined this organization. So this was like 30 years ago. I was actually a member of APEX, but I worked in a warehouse in southern Georgia with no air conditioning for 2 years, and I decided that office work was a little bit better suited for me. So today we're going to talk about blockchain and the supply chain. So actually I'm going to introduce the topic of blockchain, but I also decided to pander to my audience a little bit. So we're going to talk more about about blockchain in the supply chain near the end. But at first I want to really take you through what the blockchain is, why it's important to your life, both personally and professionally, and really try to give you an introduction to the topic. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about what is the blockchain. I want to go through some key concepts because we really need to kind of build up to some of the more complex concepts behind the blockchain. And then we're going to get into what is it good for? Like why all the hype? Right? Why is everyone talking about blockchain? And then lastly, we'll get into some specific use cases for blockchain and the supply chain. Oh, and then and basically too, if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I have a bit of a monotone, and so this can get a little bit slow if there's no interaction. So if I go through something too quickly, or if I skim over something, or if it seems like maybe I'm using a term that's not familiar to you, just let me know. All right. So first of all, how many of you have ever heard of Bitcoin? Pretty sure everybody, right? All right. So what I want to tell you is that blockchain is not just Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies, they get all the financial headlines, they get all the news because they generated all this value basically out of nowhere, right? You have billions of dollars invested in Bitcoin that seem to have been created out of nowhere. Well, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are built on top of the blockchain. It's basically the first use case, the first major use case for the blockchain, but it's not the only use case. There's a number of other use cases. So first I'm going to cover a few definitions for you. So first of all, the blockchain is a distributed data storage system. And I underline distributed because this is really the key to blockchain. It uses validation upon insertion. So when you insert a new record in the blockchain, it's inserted immediately. I'm going to get into why this is important. It uses encryption to ensure that only the people that are supposed to see information are the ones who are able to see it. And it uses smart contracts in order to enforce these rules. And when we talk about smart contracts are just programs, basically. So you have a distributed data storage that has these small smart programs that run on top of it in order to determine how transactions are entered into the blockchain and who can read that information from the blockchain. So here's some other key concepts I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about blocks a lot, right? And it's just simply this. A block is a unit of storage. And the size of a block, how a block is configured, it all depends on the implementation of the blockchain. So there's lots of implementations out nowadays. It seems like there's a new one every day. But whenever someone talks about a block, just think of it as a unit of storage for data, right? When I talk about a node is a computer, and it might be a virtual machine, it may be a computer in the cloud, but it's the computer where the blocks are stored. So when I talk about a node, think of a physical computer that has blocks of data located on it. And one of the important things to remember is that just because someone owns a node that has the data, it doesn't mean that they can actually see that data, right? So if you're participating in a blockchain at some point and you say, well, we want to host a node, or one of your partners says they want to host a node, they may be able to host that data, but it doesn't mean that they can see it, all right? Next, most of you who are familiar with blockchain would have heard of a wallet. And a wallet is simply a storage where you keep your own personal information. So in the case of an organization, it may be if you're storing, say, inventory on the blockchain, then you may keep your own information about where your inventory is in a wallet. In the case of a Bitcoin or something like that, a wallet is just where you know that tells you how many Bitcoins you have, right? So if you think of it on the personal level, a wallet is where you store your personal information. On the node is where everybody's information is stored in blocks. And then lastly, when I talk about keys or cryptographic keys, that's what's used to decrypt your information. So because the information is stored encrypted on the blockchain, you're going to need a key in order to actually read your data. So keep those concepts in mind. So number one, why is it called a blockchain? Well, in a blockchain where you store your data, it's stored in individual blocks, and these blocks are chained together. And so what happens is that, say here you have block number one where your data is stored sequentially. So as each transaction comes on the block, it's written sequentially. Each line that's written depends on the previous line before it. And it's encrypted in storage. And so what happens is that if I tamper with one of these lines in a block, every other block after that is now rendered invalid. And so what happens is that if I own a node that has blocks of data stored, and I decide that on my node I want to change the inventory, I want to change how many Bitcoins that I own, or I want to change whatever else is stored on the blockchain, I have now rendered my entire node invalid, and I can no longer participate with the other members of the blockchain. And so if someone comes to me and they say, can you tell us, how many units we have of X, and they try to read from my blockchain, it's going to come back as being invalid. If I want to rejoin and participate in the blockchain, I have to delete my node and take an entire copy from someone else who's participating. And this is where the value comes in, is because of this mechanism, I can now distribute data across a wide network of users and trust that that data is correct and untampered with. All right, so I have another analogy. So in the case of a blockchain, if you think about the internet, right, and a lot of people have said that the blockchain is basically the next incarnation of the internet. The blockchain is where the internet was around 1999, 1998, right, where it was dynamic HTML, and everybody was excited because you could make flashing flashing GIFs on the screen. So on the internet, before the internet came along, if you had some data, right, it was stored on a central computer, and if you wanted that information, you had to go to that computer, right? You had to go to that terminal, log in and get the information. What the internet allowed us to do is the internet took that centralized information, and basically anybody who had an address to that central server that's connected to the network could now access that data, which basically, it took information that was centrally stored and pushed it out to the edges. Well, what happens with the blockchain is now, if this information is centrally stored, I actually push the data out to the edges. So now, everyone who's participating in the blockchain has a copy of the data. They don't have to come to me to get a copy of the data. They have their own copy of the data, validated, encrypted, right, with their own keys to read the data. Well, what kind of data are we talking about? These are bank transactions, credit card transactions, your government records, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage and divorce, driving records. You think of ownership, right? Right now, if I own a car, I have a title that's registered with the state that proves that I own a particular car. Same thing with my house, right? All these things are stored today, they're stored centrally. Tomorrow, they'll be distributed. Your work history, credit history, medical records. And in the case of supply chain, and these are more of a private blockchain, right? You can have warehouse inventory or invoices even. And one of the things that when we talk about bank transactions, right? So I know usually the first reaction I get is I don't want my bank transactions distributed, right? I want my bank transactions, held at my bank. But if you think about the billions of people in this world who don't have access to a bank, now all of a sudden, these distributed data stores that, allow small startups basically to create their own banks on the fly, it becomes a valid proposition, right? So for people who have access to a bank, who can go to a bank that has a branch nearby or things like that, maybe you're not going to use a blockchain. But if you think of people in rural areas or in countries that don't have access to strong banking systems, now all of a sudden blockchain technology is a game changer for them. So what is it good for? Well, like I said, number one, you establish the validity of transactions in real time. And we're going to talk about why that's important. Every party that has an interest can have a hand in the validation. And tampering with one of the records will invalidate the blocks of the party holding it. So one example that I have is that if you think about a credit card or a debit card transaction when you go to the store, right? So I go to the store, I'm purchasing something, and I go to the cash register. So today, I take out my card and I swipe it. My role in that transaction is I need to validate I am who I say I am. So if the vendor, for whatever reason, asks me for my ID, I have to present my ID that says I am who I say I am. The vendor's role in that transaction is to say how much the transaction is. They have to prove that they're a valid vendor, and their role is to prove that I am who I say I am. Next, you have the credit card processing company. Their job is to build that relationship between the vendor and the bank. Right? So the credit card processing agency says, yes, this is a valid card, and by the way, it goes to this bank. They make the call to the bank and they say, okay, this transaction is for X amount of dollars, and then my bank's role is to say that I have enough money or enough credit in order to make this transaction. And so usually they send back an approval, and then usually what happens is on your phone somewhere, you can see that there's a pending transaction, right? Because basically, for speed's sake, they do a very cursory glance and they say, does it look like he has enough money? Yeah, it looks like he has enough money. Say yes, right? In the case of blockchain, you eliminate the need for the credit card processing agency, right? Because the vendor is participating on the blockchain and my bank is participating on the blockchain, so they both have a copy of all the records, right, of my credit card number. They have basically an understanding of what my financial position is, if I have enough money to make this transaction or not. So what happens is I still have a role, right? I still have to prove that I'm me, So in the future, this could be biometrics. I could use my thumbprint, maybe two-factor authentication, where I get a text that says, are you making this purchase? You know, something where I say, yes, I am making a purchase. It's a valid purchase. The vendor still has a role because they still have to say, this is how much the item cost, and yes, this person is here. And my bank still has a role. My bank still has to say, yes, he has enough money to make the purchase. But I no longer need the credit card processing agency because the vendor and my bank both have the same information now that they share via the blockchain. So what does this do? The blockchain helps to establish confidence between parties. So first of all, I talked about confidence between the vendor and my bank. But it also helps to establish confidence between citizens and the government, between lenders and borrowers. In the case of the supply chain, maybe between suppliers and, say, a third-party logistics. As an example, when you're born, you're issued a birth certificate, right? Someone at the hospital goes in, enters information into the computer, or in my case, somebody entered in by hand and mailed it to the state. But today, I'm sure they go into the state system and they enter information, and if you're born in South Carolina, that information goes into a computer in Columbia, right? And it's held centrally. When it's time for me to go to school, right, as a child, I have to write the state or go online and ask for a copy of my birth certificate. I have to pay the state to give information about me being born, to give proof that I was born on a particular date to a particular set of parents. And then you get this piece of paper, and it's got a watermark, and it's got, you know, various signatures and things like that to prove that it's valid. Well, that puts the state in the middle of the transaction, right? It's the state's job basically to provide the trust, and they do it by making a document that's supposedly difficult to counterfeit and difficult to duplicate in an unauthorized fashion. So you're incredulous. So in the future, what's going to happen is, and actually I say in the future, this is happening now. When a child is born, when the birth certificate is entered, it's going to go to a node basically at every county seat, at the very least at every county seat in the state. So you're going to have every county in every state is going to participate in their state's blockchain. At a certain point, it's going to go to every county. When a child is born in a particular county in whatever state, that data is going to go out to every state, right? And so now everyone's got the exact same copy, validated upon entry, and encrypted. When it's time for the child to go to school, instead of someone having to call the state or to write the state or to go online to get a certificate, either me or the school can go online and get a validated copy of the birth certificate at that time. Or, so I can do it, or the school as a trusted agent could be granted permission to access the blockchain for my particular record, right? So not for every record, but they could be granted access to my particular record and go ahead and download it themselves. And I say this is happening today because Brazil just issued the first blockchain-only birth certificate to a child that was born just last month. And so this is coming, right? Is, you know, your birth records and marriage records and things like that will be on the blockchain. At a certain point, when you're born, this can get pushed out to all the capitals all over the world. I mean, one of the reasons why I have my birth certificate is that I had to get a visa to go to France. Well, I had to contact the state of Ohio to get my birth certificate to mail it to France in order to get a visa. Well, in the future, in Paris, they'll have a copy of the United States birth record blockchain, and they'll be able to access records based on my permissions, right? So if I say, you can access this record, here's my key, right, to access this record, then they'll be able to do it. So how does this work for you? So one of the things is if you're interested in implementing a blockchain, they use a model called FITS in order to determine whether or not blockchain is a good fit for data. So one thing is that transactions that are rife with fraud are great for blockchains. Credit card transactions are this way. So if anyone's ever gotten a notice from their bank or something like that where they say there's a suspicious charge, it's because people are always getting credit card numbers or debit card numbers and making fraudulent charges. So any types of transaction where there's lots of fraud are great for the blockchain. Any transactions where there's an intermediary, if you think of it, most of the role of the state is to act as an intermediary in our transactions. You know, if you sell a house, you know, most of the time for closing is title search. So outside of the lending process, right, most of the time is for title searches. And that's all it is a title search is a proof of ownership where they have to go back through all the ownership records in order to determine, you know, who's owned this particular piece of property. Well, in the future, your car titles, your house titles, all these things will be on the blockchain. They'll be available in your local county, right? So they don't have to go back to the state database in order to find that data. And it'll be a trusted, proven record that is, you know, basically unhackable. So transactions where there's lots of throughput, so credit card transactions, that's another one where it's just a lot of data going through the system is a good fit for blockchains. And then data that's stable. So there's one thing where you have a lot of rights, but things like birth certificates and death certificates, once you're born, you don't change your birth certificate very often, right? You usually know who your parents are, eye color, hair color, things like that don't change. So anytime you have data that's relatively stable, it's a good fit for the blockchain. So in summary, for the introduction, so blockchains are good for building confidence between parties. You're going to find more and more of your life encoded on blockchains. And cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin run on blockchains, but it's just a single use case. And it's not the most important one. And when you're determining whether or not you want to use a blockchain or whether it's a good fit for your organization, use the FITS model. Is this something where, are these transactions where fraud is likely or even possible? Do we have to go through an intermediary or a broker in order to accomplish the task? If you do, replace the intermediary with the blockchain, and you might save yourself some money. All right, so blockchain and the supply chain. So there's actually, I mean, when you hear about blockchain, there's a lot of hype right now, right, around blockchain. And most of it, like I said, is built up because of, you know, I say the success of Bitcoin or things like that. But there's some real kind of down-to-earth use cases that really fit for blockchain. So one is IoT, and you might say this is kind of at the edge of supply chain, but the Internet of Things, right? We're selling a ton of smart gadgets right now, right? It's everything. You have smart light bulbs, you know, all of your, you know, monitoring in your house. I have actually. I like a smart house, so I get a big kick out of telling my bedroom light to turn on or turn on the TV or things like that. So I mean, there's just we're selling a lot of gadgets that generate a lot of data that come back through our systems, and then what do you do with that data? Who can use it? How does it work? Transparency and traceability. This is really one of the hot topics nowadays, and really in supply chain is how do I know where something has come from? How can I be sure of the provenance of a particular item? you can use it, I say dispute resolution, but actually it's to prevent disputes, right? If everybody has a copy of where things are, you don't have to go ask somebody where's the last place something was located. Everybody knows where the last place it was located, and so hopefully you have fewer disputes, or at least everyone can agree where something got lost. And then lastly, it's the wild, wild west right now. Like I said, if you think about the early days of the internet, especially back before the bubble, where there were .coms all over the place, right? It was like somebody, as soon as you could claim a domain name, it was gobbled up, and somebody had done a round of financing, and they started a company, and it was out of business in 2 months, right? This is kind of where we are with blockchain right now, where there are just businesses forming every day around it, where someone has a new idea every day about how to use the blockchain in a different way. So so if you have a big imagination, now's the time. So first I want to talk about IoT. So on the Internet of Things, say I have a set of smart light bulbs that I'm selling, right? So smart light bulbs generate a ton of data, right? Because every time I turn it on or turn it off or things like that, it has the ability to send back information, through your network back to the producer. So if something goes wrong with it, if it's getting ready to die, if it's the first time it's used, right, it's going to send you back information about its unique identity and what event happened with it. So in the case of the Internet of Things, you're going to have a super high volume of data, right? I mean, it's just going to be billions of data points just being generated constantly. And so all of the different players on here basically have what I say is all you can eat. So depending on where you are in this chain, right? If you're in manufacturing and you want to know, basically how many bulbs are dying on a daily basis, so you can kind of get an idea of, what you need to produce, or how many bulbs have been, turned on for the first time, right? If you want an idea about that, then you're going to want to capture and process a certain amount of data. You don't want all the data, right? Every time it gets turned off or on, you don't want that. You just want, certain events. Same thing with research and development. If you're in retail, if you're in finance, or if you're at the corporate office, right, you're going to want different types of data through it. So everyone's got a node, everyone's got a copy of the data, but in this case, they're only going to want to read what they care about. Also in this case, you can see where this is basically where you have one set you have one participant that's doing a lot of writes, and everyone else is just reading. So usually in the blockchain, you have everyone is participating in reading and writing, but in this case, it's just reads for the most part. Well, in the case of traceability, and this is one of my favorite use cases, because there's a group of ranchers out in Wyoming who they take great care of their cattle, right? It's grass-fed. It wanders. Their cows live a happy life, and die of natural causes, and before they're sent to the meat processing. Well, not really, but they spend more money and more time on their cows than other factory, producers. The problem is when they send their cows to the meat processing plant, they all get bundled up in a lot with ranchers that don't spend the same amount of care on their cattle, and their cattle basically gets commoditized, right? They can't command the highest price for their cows. So in the case of the blockchain, what happens is each of those cows, before it goes to market, gets identified with a unique identifier, and that cow gets registered on the blockchain. The meat processor also participates in the blockchain, and before that cow is turned into a carcass, or once the cow is turned into a carcass, that carcass is marked with a unique identifier there's a transaction that's registered that says this cow was turned into this carcass at this time at this meat processor. So now at this point, the farmer can see what has happened to his cow, and the meat processor can tell you what cow and what farm this carcass came from. Once it goes to the wholesaler, it's the same thing. When the carcass is turned into primals or into smaller cuts, once again, they're marked with a unique identifier. It's registered on the supply chain, and now you have traceability all the way from primals in the primals on the wholesale market all the way back to the cow, and then the same thing to the local market. In this case, depending on the size of the retailer, if you have a small retailer, they still have traceability, but they're only reading from the blockchain, right? Because maybe they don't have the assets, or they don't have the ability or the know-how to actually host their own node. So in this case, they're just reading, and they're saying, okay, now I can tell you where this meat came from. In the case of your larger retailers, and Walmart being one, they're one of the big drivers of blockchain technology these days. They actually participate, and so you can almost go to, I say, the table, right? You can almost go all the way to someone purchasing a package as far as traceability. Now that gets a little bit creepy, but so you might not want to go that far, but at least they can go to when it was sold, right? And so now I have traceability all the way from the point of sale all the way back to the individual cow. If I'm a rancher, now I can get information about sales for for my particular brand of meat. If the retailer wants to do surveys about customer satisfaction or things like that, they can tell which lots certain steaks came from or things like that. And so you have traceability all the way back through the supply chain. So for slightly less, so if you're a vegan and you want to use another example, think of offshore suppliers, right, for parts. A lot of times clothing manufacturers, they have an issue where they make a contract with someone to make a certain clothing line for them, right? And so they fly back to the US and they think that this factory that they inspected is producing their goods. So, and then, and I'm sure a few of you have heard news stories, right, of where, they find out later on that it's no longer that factory that's making their goods, right? It's another factory that's making their goods that has less ethical practices. So in this case, instead of, say, a cow that has a unique identifier, you give a factory a unique identifier, and you say, look, this is your unique identifier. If you let somebody else use it, you've invalidated our agreement. You can no longer supply goods for us, right? So now, from now on, everything you produce for us has to have your unique identifier, and the case of goods that you produce also has to have a unique identifier with it. They put that on the blockchain, send it through this system, and now as I'm selling things in my retail outlet, I can trace it back to that original manufacturer. And so now I can say with confidence to my customers that this ethical factory produced this case of goods, and I can trace it back. I can prove it.
I got a question.
Shoot.
Do you think, it's your opinion, maybe anybody else's opinion, but do you think with this blockchain technology, it would inspire companies to become more vertically integrated? It seems like it would make it easier if you wanted to become vertically integrated. It would be easier to manage the supply chain, from a full black check, with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, what you get is that you get each participant in the chain, right, has full visibility into the rest of the chain, right? So, so I don't know. I'd have to do some research on vertical integration, but I mean, I can't say that every participant there's no longer a handoff, right? There's no longer a here you go, it's over the fence, and it's no longer my problem anymore, right? At each step in the line, I know what happens all the way through till till that item is sold, and vice versa, right? The person who sells it has visibility all the way back through from where it was made or where even to the raw materials. So
if I'm a company in a blockchain, I got all those companies in there, or I'll share, and I'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to buy every company in this blockchain, and that will be one major corporation.
yeah, so
It's already together.
yeah, so now
It's the wild, wild west.
the things, yeah.
You know everything that's going on, so why buy the company below you?
Right. I mean, you still have
So
the.
you have more control? You say you have more control?
But the thing is, though, is that I mean, there's a reason.
You're not splitting. You're not divvying the profit along all those companies. You're taking all that profit along the whole supply chain. That's why you would do it.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Is that you take the risk as well. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that actually I see it going the other way, right? Is that once everybody is sharing data, it actually makes it easier for you to outsource more, right? Because, now I can see, when my little supplier says, yeah, it's coming, right? It's coming. I've made it. I can actually see maybe his planning, or I can see his production run, right? It's no longer, oh, it's on the truck, right? I can see what's in the truck. So in that case, why would I buy him, right? When I know what he has.
How would that help your competitiveness along the way? Because wouldn't you be able to see prices like your competitors' prices in?
So no. So in that case, if you put your prices on the blockchain, they would be encrypted, right? And you wouldn't. But I wouldn't put my prices on the blockchain, right? That wouldn't be something that. So this is a case of so this is a good one, right? Where say. I have, this is my supply chain, and I have, third-party transportation, right? So I'm not going to put my transportation prices on the blockchain, right? Because, because the prices for one guy is not the same prices that I'm giving another guy. So I'm not going to put that there. I might put inventory, right? I might put, this pallet is here or something like that, but I'm not going to tell you, how much I charge them for this load or something like that.
But I mean, that would be strictly your portion of the blockchain, though, right? Because it wouldn't be like this person that sold you the product or is using your transportation. Because they would know what you charge them in a sense. Could they put that on the blockchain themselves? As far as their step in the process?
So, once again, so if it's something that's proprietary, right, then no, that's not you want to put things on there that you want to share, right? So anything that's private, right, or that's a competitive advantage doesn't help you, right, to put it on the blockchain. It's just things where sharing helps, right, where sharing facilitates, speed. The other thing is that a lot of times, like in situations like this, what you're going to see is that companies are going to build their own blockchains, right? Now, there's some companies out there, and I actually have a slide on this if we want to distribute the slides that talks about private blockchains versus public blockchains. But what you're going to see is that large companies are going to be the first ones to start to build out blockchains. Like I said, like Walmart. They build a blockchain and they tell their suppliers, I would say they ask their suppliers, but I'm sure Walmart tells their suppliers, you're going to participate, right? You're going to participate in the blockchain. You're going to register, when these particular events happen. And that's what you're going to see early on. You're going to see big players building out their own blockchains, right? But then what's going to happen is that the large transportation companies are going to say, look, man, I got to participate in like 16 blockchains, right? So each one of you guys wants me to put, my data on your particular blockchain. And it's not doing me any good, right? I got 16 different systems I have to go into. And so what I believe is going to happen is that you're going to see like some larger, blockchains where you're going to have, one of the cloud providers or something like that is gonna build a blockchain for transportation and say, look, everyone can participate. However, you have to have a particular key to see certain data, right? So the data may all be stored in the cloud, but you have to have, your key in order to see your data. So in the case of talking about dispute resolution, right? And so in this case, much like with the processing of the cow, like when I produce, so in the plant, I produce a good, right? And so what happens is, and depending on the value of the good, right? If it's something expensive, that thing is going to get a unique identifier, right? And it's going to get registered on the blockchain. So Michael, you're saying you guys make transmissions. A transmission would get its own unique identifier and go on the blockchain. I work for a company that made hair combs, right? You're not going to put a unique identifier on a hair comb. Most likely what you're going to do is once it's in a case, that case will get a unique identifier, maybe a RFID chip or something like that, so that as it goes through the process, it can be uniquely identified. As the cases get put into pallets, the pallet gets registered. So the case gets registered on the blockchain first. Next, the pallet gets registered on the blockchain with that case as a member of that pallet. And then at each step in the chain, each step the blockchain is updated. So in this case, in the plant, I'm building out the cases. The cases get put on the pallet. At the DC, that pallet may get put into a location. At that point, the location is updated in the blockchain. If I put that pallet on a trailer and put that trailer in the yard, that information is put on the blockchain. So at any given point, I can trace back to an individual case and find this location. And not only that, but everyone who participates that has permission can trace it. So if I identify that a case is for, or a product is for a particular customer, and I want to allow it, that customer can go to the blockchain and say, hey, I have my unique identifier. I know this thing has been produced for me. Where is it in the blockchain? So in this model, and you saw in some of the other ones, right, where you could only write or read. In this model, every contributor can read and write to the chain. And then at every step, every participant can find a particular item on the chain. And so in this case, when I say dispute resolution, but like I said, most likely, or mostly what it is it's more transparency. Because everyone can see where things are, you can see where something fell off the back of the truck, right? You can see where, someone in a cycle count made an adjustment and said that this was no longer in the location that you said it was. It's in a different location, or it has a different count than was originally there. And I think, so this was the end of my formal presentation. But so what I was saying is that, so in short, the blockchain is really something that's going to impact the entire world. And where it is today is really at the beginning. It's really a wide open field for it. So if you guys are interested in in exploring more, there's a real, I guess, a real chance for proofs of concepts or things like that. If you're interested in learning more, IBM is really one of the biggest leaders in blockchain technology. They have something called the Hyperledger Foundation, where what they've done is they've taken a number of blockchain implementations, put it under one kind of foundation, and published a lot of information about it. So I would encourage you to take a look at that at IBM's Hyperledger Foundation. Read up, or I guess subscribe on some of the Bitcoin information. I kind of skipped over the whole cryptocurrency, the whole cryptocurrency world, just because there's a lot of hype around it already, and I really wanted to talk about the foundations of it. But take a look at cryptocurrencies and how they're being used, because more and more you're going to see things either being purchased with cryptocurrencies, or what I'm seeing is that cryptocurrencies are starting to replace bonds. So in the past, if you have athletes now who before, if they wanted to insure their contract, they could sell futures or they could sell bonds on their contract. Now they're offering coins. Basically, they're what do they call it? They're tokenizing their contracts. Entertainers are starting to do it, right? So David Bowie did this years ago famously, where he sold futures on his future earnings, right? And so he sold a number of bonds in order to ensure his future earnings. And today, what people are doing is they're tokenizing their future earnings. So they're going out to these coin exchanges, and they're saying, okay, based on what I think I'm going to earn, I'm going to issue a certain number of tokens, or I'm going to promise a certain number of tokens to people, and then they pay out over time. So there's a lot of interesting things going on top of the blockchain platform. So, so I had some kind of post notes. So several states have enacted commissions to study and encourage blockchain implementation, and you're seeing this grow every day. You see a number of states have started it because they want to regulate cryptocurrency. So that's the first thing is they start with concern, right? They're worried about, number one, they're worried about the loss of revenue that they get when people start dealing with currencies that aren't regulated by a central government. So that's their first concern, is they're going to lose tax revenue. But then behind that, though, they're starting to investigate basically how to regulate it. The other thing is you're seeing that some government agencies are actually starting to copy nodes for cryptocurrencies and other blockchains, and so they actually are hosting cryptocurrency nodes in federal facilities now, trying to keep up basically with the technology. So you're seeing some states that are studying it to regulate, but other states are studying it to do those use cases that I talked about. The birth certificates, the death certificates, your driving records, or things like that. So states, they're usually more, I guess, technologically advanced, like California, Arizona, are really starting to investigate how to put more of their citizens' lives on the blockchain. There's an estimate out there that spending on blockchain projects is going to reach $16 billion. I mean, when you see a company like Walmart, which is generally fairly conservative, start to invest in a technology like this, then you have to imagine that other companies are going to follow suit. And then, like I said before, the first blockchain-only birth certificate was issued in Brazil recently. And then I had some other links. So I don't know, is there a way for me to distribute this if people want it? So yeah, you can take a look at these links to study more. There was a blockchain presentation to the Apex Inland Empire that I linked to on YouTube, and there's a number of videos on YouTube as well about blockchain and how it's going to impact our lives. And then lastly, I have a whole thing on public versus private, which just basically, there's some people who are real sticklers for this. Things like cryptocurrencies are generally public blockchains, which means that everyone has access to it. If you want to go out and copy an Ethereum node or a Bitcoin node, you can, right? You can't do anything with it, right, unless you can break the encryption. But if you're a good citizen, or if you're really curious and you just happen to have a really powerful computer, you can go out and get a copy of these nodes. So like I said, anyone can participate, but one of the things though is on the public blockchain, and I'm pretty sure most of you have heard these horror stories, right? Where someone has a wallet that has, 500 Bitcoin, right? That was worth, $500 10 years ago, or not 10, 5 years ago, and now it's worth what, 500,000 or 50,000, and they lost it. They lost their keys, or they lost their wallet, and they didn't back it up. And so that's the thing is, on the public blockchain, if you lose your assets, right? There's no one you can go to ask to recreate it or to give you your key back. It's just gone. It's still stored, but it's stored encrypted, and nobody can encrypt it or decrypt it. Yeah, so public blockchains by their nature are highly encrypted and ultra secure. It also makes them slow. So in Bitcoin transactions, there's a limit on how many transactions can go through because of how much validation they have to go through and how hard it is to actually go through the encryption. Now, private blockchains, which is what most of us in the corporate world would deal with, are just set up by private entities. And so you have to reach an agreement with your partners or with the other contributors as far as who wants to participate, who's going to host, who's going to store what data, who has access to what. So there's going to be a number of agreements that have to be put together in order to implement a private blockchain. I didn't really go into proof of work, but normally when you write to a private blockchain, there's miners. I'm pretty sure you heard of Bitcoin miners or things like that. These are high-powered programs that do go through the validation process, and they purposefully make it resource intensive to make it very hard to do the validation, because when you finish validating, whoever's first gets a portion, it gets a percentage of a Bitcoin back, right? That's how you earn money. That's how you mine Bitcoins. And so they make it, really computationally intensive so that only a few participants can actually do the work. But in this case, so it also makes it slow, and it makes it difficult to participate. If you have a private blockchain, you don't need that, right? So, and a lot of people feel like, well, it's not really a blockchain if you don't have proof of work. I think that's splitting hairs. So just so you know, you don't have to have that computational intensity in order to have a blockchain. And the data available in a private blockchain is limited in scope to the participants invited to participate. So, like I showed you in that other model where you have a transportation company or things like that, you're only going to have visibility on the people that you invite into your private blockchain. And so if you don't have all of your transporters participating, you're going to have holes in your data, which could impact the quality of your analysis or things like that. So the more participants you can have, the more complete your data set is, the more valuable, or the more value you're going to get out of a private blockchain. So that's it for the formal part of my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to go through it. I know that's a lot. It's I really had to condense this down. All right, awesome. So I'll be here, or you can reach me on my LinkedIn page. I think it was on the invite. If you have any questions or if you want to reach out, I'm happy to talk about it. Can't really say I'm an expert in this. I have a healthy curiosity. I read a ton about it, and I did a proof of concept for Michelin. That's really my background with blockchain. Is I have worked with it hands-on, but mostly I just love to read on this. So
what is Michelin looking to do with it? Is it the warehousing, traceability, supply?
So actually, it wasn't so much in supply chain. We were looking at chargebacks. So we have one organization who's responsible for distributing laptops. And one of the problems that we have at Michelin is, like, we don't charge individuals or individual departments for laptops. And so the departments that have a laptop don't know how much they cost. And so we have some people that have 2 laptops. We have laptops that are in drawers. They have laptops that are just sitting on a desk that do nothing, like, most of the time, but somebody needs them like once a month. And so because there's no cost to those individuals, they don't think about, right, the overall cost of Michelin. So we were building a blockchain in order to keep track of those costs, right, for individual departments. And I want to spread that out to other different types of chargebacks as well. So we're looking at that. All right. Well, I appreciate the invitation, and like I said, thanks for having me, and thanks for listening.